Welcome, Friday folks, Tech Art fans. This is Chris. I am your host for Tech Art Talk Live, and today we are going to continue our series on the procedural gems. And this person that we have on interview today is Luiz Kruel. Luiz is the senior technical artist at SideFX Software, and he is ready to. And he is doing his thing, and he is busy preparing for the next release of Houdini. I believe that's 18.5, and he's very, very busy, but he took time out of his day in order to share with us his concepts for proceduralism. And without further ado, let's get the interview started with Luiz.
All right, welcome Tech Art Talk Live. Folks, here we are with Luiz Kruel. He is the senior tech artist at SideFX, and he is here to join us today with our all-important question of the day, all of about proceduralism. If anyone knows proceduralism, Luiz knows it. So how are you doing today, Luiz?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. So the big question of the day is, suppose that you've got an artist who doesn't have a lot of traditional procedural training, gets thrown into a situation and it says, okay, get this pipeline up to procedural quality, or get it up to proceduralism as fast as possible because we have a giant world to create. What would be your basic strategy on telling this person, how to get started and what to focus on or what to consider?
So I guess the first would be ask lots and lots of questions. So someone is giving you a prompt, hopefully they give you more information than that. And then you can say, what kind of pipeline? Is that built already? Does it exist? Is it an imaginary new one that you saw somewhere? Are you recreating something that was done manually and kind of making it procedural? Or is it something completely kind of out there? The best outcome for that is that it's something that already exists. Then it's a process that they do manually and they just want to automate it. In that case, it's kind of a straightforward, just divide the problem up into smaller chunks and then try to map a procedural step to an artistic step. And then start going in and eliminating everything that can be automated. You start with the thing that takes the longest time and try to tackle those first, because those are the biggest wins. And then you start moving towards the things that are maybe a little less time consuming and require a lot of kind of artist intervention. So I think the complete procedural pipeline is almost a myth, to where it's like, theoretically it could exist, but you might not like the results it yields. So there's always going to either be a lot of artist interaction in the beginning, kind of seeding that proceduralism really well with kind of simple inputs that then get generated into complex outputs, or at the end of the pipeline, an artist kind of goes in and either has a yay or nay on what was generated and generates more, or just goes in by hand and fixes some of the stuff.
I see. Now, what if, now that was if the system had existed already. What if they were expected to create a brand new pipeline?
That one is really hard because it's easy to spin out of control in that situation, because you have to be very methodical about what you're building, because if you don't know what you're building first, then it's really hard to build against that. So that's the first challenge. So even then, I would try to build the process by hand. I would try to do it once by hand. And if the point is make a giant world, you try to make a small, beautiful corner of the world, and then you populate that back out, and then you add proceduralism to kind of extrapolate. But I've seen it a lot of times where people will be like, I want a cliff generator. And then it's like, cool, what do you want the cliffs to look like? Procedural noise. And it was like, all right. And it's like, do you have any art reference to it? It's like, no, we'll know it when we see it. And then it starts kind of going down the red flags path. And it's like, well, you might end up with something cool. And I think that's the part that's it. The person creating it will land on something cool, but then for the other person that's requesting it, they might not agree on what that cool is. And that's the that contract between the two people, which is like an art director saying, this is what I want, or this is what I think cool looks like, or this is what fits thematically for this output, is the part that you can get there, but it's just going to take a lot more iterations, because you're going to try something, show it to them, and then they're going to say yay or nay, and then you start kind of whittling down closer and closer.
So a lot of that interaction back and forth with the proceduralist trying to figure out, okay, will this work? Will this work? Going back and forth is what causes the amount of time.
I think we pushing the limit of your Wi-Fi, or maybe it's on my side.
I wouldn't be surprised. You know, it's I've got a.
There it goes. You're back.
Yep. Okay. Good. You know, sorry about that.
No,
so it's the interaction that goes back and forth that causes this serious amount of time.
Yeah, because if you're making, and I think that's a lot of times you see a lot of success on indie type scales where a person can basically build a whole world procedurally, or really small teams, because they can basically just say either art is the driver and design will eat whatever proceduralism comes out of it, or it is just a small team that you can do that iteration really fast, so there's not a lot of cooks in the kitchen asking for different requirements out of it. But if it's, I need to make a procedural cliff, but a character needs to be able to run on it, and it needs to grapple, and it needs to have these points, and it has to have overhangs, and like as you start to kind of add more and more requirements, one, it's good because you start to narrow it down, but in most cases those exist, but they're not communicated. So you show something and then people will say, no, I didn't like it, and it's hard to kind of pull out why they didn't like it. And it could be a subconscious thing, or it could be very direct things like, I want overhangs, or I want it to look like this type of mountain range.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that it should be the responsibility of the artist to seek out to the team beforehand and identify as many of the components, as many of the features set as possible before even embarking on such an endeavor.
Yeah, and there's two ways of approaching, because I see proceduralism as software development for all intents and purposes. So when you're building a tool, you can build like a minimal viable product, which usually is you're just trying to convince them that proceduralism is the way. So you can just be like, hey, this is a cliff generator, and it's not your cliff generator, but it just shows that I can take a side of a mountain and I can make that look pretty. And that is kind of the minimal product that you can use to convince people. And then you start gathering more feedback and more design, or you start growing that minimal. So you can do it that way. That way you may or may not end up where you want, but you may end up somewhere cooler than you thought you were going to end up. And then the other way is you have predefined specs that you're building against, which makes it simpler. And usually you can kind of execute that without too much trouble.
Yeah, I often teach my students that over communication is pretty much the safe way of going through. If you over communicate, under promise, and then over deliver, then hopefully some of that serendipitous magic will actually come out. Did I lose internet again? Oh, brother, I think I lost internet again. Did I lose internet again? Oh boy.
You did, but it caught up. It caught up. Yeah.
Okay.
So under promise and over deliver.
Well, that's what I'm saying is just over communicate, under promise, and over deliver, and then hopefully some of that serendipitous magic will come to life.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool.
And just the last thing to say is that because proceduralism is still somewhat new, it is a good place for kind of junior artists to come in and tackle, because a junior artist with a year of proceduralism or even 6 months of proceduralism expertise still has a lot more proceduralism expertise than a veteran with 30 years of industry. So it's an area that a junior person can kind of come in and stand out for themselves.
Well, great. Now you're dealing with SideFX Labs, and you're one of the primary content drivers. Now, do you focus primarily just on real-time applications, or to just variously anything?
Realistically, it's anything. We're seeing the worlds collide pretty fast. That's why we renamed because they used to be called the game dev tools, and we renamed them labs because we started visiting some film customers and they're all using it. And some would like to use it, but they didn't look at it because it was called the game dev toolset. So we have things like photogrammetry, and like everybody's doing photogrammetry. We have the Substance plugin there, the Go Z bridge in there. So there's all of these things that realistically is for everybody, but we primarily built it against games because that's our background and that's the team that we're in, but it is open for all walks of life, if you like. But it is definitely biased towards real time and kind of those type of workflows.
No, very cool. Now, right now, what's the current count of the number of tools that SideFX Labs is supporting?
Ooh, it's over 200. I think it's probably like 205, 204 at this point. Yeah.
Well, with such a large library of tools, where do the ideas for all these tools come from? Is it just you and the other principals?
It's mainly customers. So it's usually a customer having a meeting and being like, you know what I need? I need like a file watcher in Python so I can like reboot and reload things as I'm saving. And it's like, that should just be a thing. And it shouldn't be something that you have to write. So we'll build it. And that one is something that I want to write in the next few days. So that's an example of something that came up in a conversation. And it's like, yeah, there's really no good way of doing that in Houdini right now. And we feel like it should. A lot of them are integrations with other software. So I think probably 12 to 15 of those tools are in that category, which is just, I want to send data to ZBrush easily. I want to load in a substance file. I want photogrammetry pipelines inside of Houdini. So there's a lot of that. And yeah, it's been 4.5 years now of building tools. So it just accumulates. If you think like one tool a week, that's we're already up to.
Well, one tool a week is actually a huge number. And so from your perspective, how do you keep track of the entire library to provide, to prevent any kind of redundancy or any kind of doing things, reinventing the wheel every time someone comes up with a new idea?
Yeah, so that one, the luck again is on the small team. So for the most part, has been 3 of us. Now there's 2 of us. We're going to go back to 3 in the near future. And we just know what everybody's working on. We meet, we talk daily and we meet explicitly twice a week to kind of talk about things. And so we just have a decent idea of everything that's there. And then people generally don't reinvent the wheel. We can kind of save. But even I sometimes forget some of the tools that we have in there. There's a bunch of little ones that we sometimes, I think we had a couple of duplicated ones at some point and we just kind of do passes every now and then and kind of deprecate them or merge them, or we have a few that have gone into Houdini proper that we deprecate. There's a couple that just become obsolete because functionality comes from other tools. So it's not that much. Like it is just, you just have a big list of them and every now and then you do a check and you do documentation passes and then those kind of suss out the ones that need to be retired.
I see. So so since you guys are producing a lot of different tool sets, if there was an artist, introducing proceduralism to their facility, they're going to be generating, a massive load of tools themselves. And this primary person is probably going to be tool generator number 1. Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say, their primary gotchas that this artist should avoid when approaching just a large set of tools?
Yeah, so I would say first is lean towards a lot set of tools because it's easy to make the one hip file that rules all the world. And then you basically just have this one monster network that does everything as opposed to having very modular pieces. So it's okay to build a module that then you can put into another module that you start building higher level tools out of it. So don't go at it trying to do everything. I would say refactor often and kind of look back. So I've done tools that it's like, hey, I just need to do this again. And the second time around you just make it a lot cleaner and a lot of improvements. Usually the way I develop is I'll build a prototype, put it out there and kind of let it sit, get feedback, and then I'll kind of rebuild it kind of from scratch based on the prototype. And then having that time apart from the tool, it solidifies a lot of things and it kind of gives me fresh eyes to look at it again and be like, what the hell was I thinking there? This for loop here could just be a wrangle over here and I can knock that out. This Python stop doesn't need to be in Python, and kind of start breaking it down that way. But when you're trying to get a tool to work, I usually go into this like berserk mode of just going into the zone and just mashing stuff until it works. And then once it works, I don't want to touch it because it works. But the thing is pure chaos. So it needs to kind of live by itself working. expose the problems with it, and then come back in and kind of do it right and clean it up.
I see. Okay, so it's kind of a whole mess of different strategies in order to keep track of.
It is.
Yeah, when I presented this concept to you before, you created the metaphor that the whole situation was what did you call it? The Kobayashi.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah,
Which is an
Kobayashi
old.
Maru. Yeah.
Yes, it's an old Star Trek reference to the unbeatable question or the unbeatable test situation.
Yeah.
Now, what other red flags would you toss at a beginning proceduralist to watch out for this situation? Because technically, this is a fictional situation, but it is based on a real situation that I somewhat modified in order to change things around.
Yeah. So if the audience is already kind of aware of it, I can kind of paraphrase some of it. I have it up. So the red flags for me were the amount of money that the company funded. So it was 2 million of funds, and a quarter of that was going to go into building this massive scale thing. So I'm like, okay, 500,000. How long do you have? And then if you start splitting up some salaries, that goes fast, really, really fast. If you think of like a big studio, like the burn rate is like $1 million a month on average. So if you think it's like, okay, so it's not going to be a big operation, so that will give you maybe like a year or two, but that's still, that was a red flag of just how much money you need to build these experiences. Mm-hmm. The other one was the team was all children and friends of the executives. So that one it's a massive red flag for me, just because one, you're going into an environment that is already established and you're going in as the outsider trying to lead it. It's usually tricky, especially going out of school. So that's tricky for the most seasoned veterans to kind of build trust with them, turn the thing around, kind of convince them that your way is the way. So that was a giant red flag, especially when nepotism plays a part, which then you might have people that are not necessarily qualified to do the job, but have the job anyway. So then it gets even harder to where not only do you need to work with them, but they're not the people either you chose or can do the job. So that was, yeah. And then the art assets needed to be completed in 1 year. So that was the other red flag. Because even just building a pipeline of that scale, I would say it would probably take you 6 months if you're optimal, kind of just blasting through everything. So then you're going to have another 6 months to work through everything. And in some cases, that's the tough question is proceduralism the right thing, or do you brute force it? So if it takes you 3 weeks to write a script to do something that would have taken you a day, is it worth writing that script? And it's like, it depends how many days you're going to do it. So if you're going to use that script 20 times, yeah, it's worth it. If you're going to use that script 5 times, just brute force the thing and get it over with. So in some of these cases, unless proceduralism is like part of the core experience, that every player is going to have a different experience and it's kind of tied to the heart of it. If you're just using proceduralism to cut corners, sometimes like outsourcing might be just as good as just as efficient. But it depends. And that's the part of the control. So like proceduralism can help you if those 10 artists have a very specific look that they want, and you're using it to basically augment their powers and make them super fast. So that's worth it. So I've seen studios where you basically have 3 super senior artists, and then 1 procedural artist just takes those 3 artists' amount of work and then populates a whole game out of it, but makes it look exactly like their art style, which then saves on outsourcing and all of that stuff. So it does vary in case by case, but in this case, towards someone coming out of school, there's a lot of soft skills that you learn in the job that kind of are the red flags here, towards like, how do you navigate that scenario? It's less on the technical side. On the technical side, yeah, like a team of 10 artists should be able to do it, but that's the other part, that there's 10 of them, probably 8 of them are going to not want proceduralism, and they're going to kind of push back on it because it's different and they don't understand it and they've done things the way they've done. So that's, if you have 3, it's usually kind of easy to convince, but once it's like a crowd, it becomes a taller order to kind of sell them on it, unless they're already sold on it. And hopefully the work we've done over the past years helped people see the value of proceduralism, but it's still a hurdle, and it's still not fully understood.
No, so that's excellent. That's an awesome answer. So thank you very much for pulling all that together. So it's actually an amalgamation of things. And
It is.
so I guess the biggest takeaways of it is like proceduralism is a great tool, but you have to look at the problem holistically and be able to realize where the best places for proceduralism is, and will proceduralism be the actual best tool for certain situations, and identify, basically pick your battles.
Mm-hmm.
And the other big takeaway I got from your answer was that there's still a lot of politics and leadership issues that need to be incorporated in order, first, to sell the team on proceduralism, and two, in order to actually teach everyone, and kind of like, because they're dealing with a whole new mindset, and being able to teach and admonish to them in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's good. And I did a presentation at GDC, I think 2 years ago. That is basically that is like, how do you sell a team on proceduralism? And you go through, you get your early adopters, and you get your early adopters to really like it. And then they're the ones that are going to be convincing, because you're not going to convince an artist. You're going to convince the early adopter, and then the artists are going to convince the other artists, because they're going to make something that looks amazing with it. And then the other artists are going to be like, how did you do that? Like, can you teach me? But there is this kind of barrier between art and tech art a lot of times, that the early adopters will come and try to get the cool stuff straight from the fountain, but then the rest of the population will kind of talk amongst themselves and learn amongst each other. So that's something to consider too.
All right, very cool. Well, that's an awesome answer. Now, if somebody wanted to look up your prior lecture that you gave at GDC a couple of years ago, how would they go about doing that?
I think that one is actually open on YouTube, so you can just like Google like Luiz Kruel proceduralism. I think it's like Intro to Proceduralism, it's called. And I think it was the Tech Art Bootcamp in 2017.
I see.
Sounds right. Yeah, 2017.
Okay. Now, are there any other resources or any other kind of places that you would advise that folks check out when they are first exploring the possibilities of proceduralism?
Yeah, I would say the SideFX website, like if you're going straight with Houdini, but just the company's website is probably going to be the best place that they're hopefully advertising what the thing can do. So you can at least get ideas of that, and then communities and forums to where you can ideally watch a lot of ideas for inspiration, and then you can start to narrow down the problem and be like, I want to do it like they did that bit, but then this bit I want to do how they did over here, and then I like how they did this other bit. And then you have an idea of what you want to build. Then you start building, and you start going to hit walls, and then the best way is just having a community around it, either in school or in like online, that you can ping for help, and generally speaking, people are very generous with their time on that.
Yeah, that's what I've found, is that most people in the procedural community are extraordinarily generous with their help. That people usually aren't trying to hide anything. It's usually a matter of, are you able to get something out? And if you can, there's a lot of just brute force and just elbow grease, producing the result. Yeah.
And I think that is the one nice thing that, especially speaking for Houdini, there is this kind of, it's just this like middle ground where everybody can talk freely about Houdini, and you're not giving away company secrets. And I think there is a little bit of a factor of hiring procedural artists is so hard. So putting out information and saying, this is the stuff I'm doing, actually attracts more talent to your studio. So I think more companies are starting to share what they're found and what they're doing in that space to attract more talent to kind of come in and fuel that fire.
So last thing, what is your prognosis for the demand for proceduralists as far as tech art skills in the future is concerned?
I think it's just going to keep going up, and it's going to become a specialized role, I believe, to where that's just going to be kind of like you have people that specialize in shaders, and you have people that specialize in rendering. You're going to have people that just specialize in proceduralism, and there's already job postings for like Houdini artists and procedural tech artists and things like that. So I think that's just going to keep growing, and it's the cycle. So I think Houdini had the first big boom in the last generation jump, that people went from 360 to Xbox One, and they're like, there's no way I can keep doing this by hand. and the little bit started to take on, and now we're seeing another surge with this next generation coming down the pipe, and people are going like, yeah, we thought we could do it, and then we kind of got some outsourcing, and we crunched, and then we got into like over 1,000-man teams. Now we can't go to 3,000 people. Like we need to find better ways.
So large scaling issues again. I've never actually seen anything that large before.
Yeah. No, there's some big ones right now. Just insane.
All right. Any last words to tell to the audience before we wrap things up?
No, I think that thanks for having me, and hopefully it was helpful, and then just keep at it. I think it is a steep learning curve, but it does pay off really well, and it is, like most technical achievements, it is something that you're going to have to keep at it and slowly kind of build little tricks and tips and start building larger and larger concepts out of them.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Luis. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your thoughtful answers. And we wish the best of you for the new release of Houdini coming up in hopefully the near future, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, and have yourself a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
All right.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Luis, for providing an outstanding interview today and talking about what you're working on with SideFX Labs and other Houdini products, and getting back to us and giving us your very poignant and kind of practical perspective of proceduralism and how to introduce proceduralism into the workplace, which I think is very, very plausible, and it transcends the fact of going beyond the actual proceduralism itself and actually goes beyond into diplomacy, leadership, and overall communication skills, which I think are all very effective. So thank you very much, Luis. Big kudos, call out to you. Thank you very much, folks, for attending another episode of Tech Art Talk Live. Tune in next week, and I think we might just have yet another interview with the Procedural Gems series. I'm not quite sure, but I think I have Eric Hansen lined up, and Eric Hansen is an artist who is now teaching, but he is renowned for creating lots of big cities, especially like for Disney's Atlantis and other similar metropolises. They were all his creations, and he is going to give his perspective on creating virtual worlds. And so that's all we have for today. So thank you very much for coming by. Have a great weekend. Tune in next week for another episode of Tech Art Talk Live, and don't forget, link me up on subscribe to this YouTube channel. Check me out on Facebook. Check out on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe and then to like me and hit that like button. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.